Here to shake shit up a little bit. So we're going to start today by putting you all on the spot. So I'm going to throw this out and I will be calling out your names. Part of the magic of this group of people and what we're trying to make happen is you never know when you might meet somebody who can change your life. I was literally just emailing somebody right before this call about a woman I met on an airplane who has opened all sorts of doors for me. And we started our conversation because she was coloring. And this was before all of the coloring books and all of that were in trend. So we're going to do a little bit more of introduction. So what I want you to share is who you are and what adventure are you on professionally? So your adventures, I'm looking for a new job, or you're trying to pivot your career, or you're just trying to figure out how to be more awesome, whatever the answer it is. And on that adventure, what is it you are hoping to manifest? So you remember how the fairy godmothers can't help Cinderella to get to the ball unless she knows that she's going to a ball. We need to know both. So who you are, what adventure you're on, and what is your ball. So Joanna, only because you have the same name and I feel like throwing you in the deep end, I'm going to make you go first. So
I'm here for it. Thanks. Hi, everybody. My name is also Joanna. I am here because I think Joanna is truly an awesome human being, and I'm interested in anything she is doing. And I am in the middle of a career pivot, and my ultimate goal is creating a concise narrative about how to talk about myself, my skills, and my value, which are all very varied. And so I have a hard time really articulating exactly what it is I do and what my values are, which is exactly what Joanna does. So that's why I'm here.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, Susan, your turn in the hot seat in the garden. Love it.
So hot out here. Question is here, okay? Just making sure I got it.
We are all good.
Okay. I think because a lot of the thing I'm focused on for my next job, which is what I'm looking for, is very much a future looking thing. And being able to articulate that in a way that people can understand would be helpful.
Awesome.
Specifically, I'm looking at how companies can help leverage technology to help their customers decarbonize. And that's a little bit, but I think it's going to be a big thing.
Well, you've got a fancy word, decarbonize, I haven't heard before, so I'm very curious. Okay, Ching, you are up. I know a little bit, but why don't you share with the rest of the group?
Hi everyone, I've been to Joanna's session in the past few months and have been benefited a lot from her coaching and her advice. So I'm on the journey pivoting my career from science to business. So my original intention was to go into marketing, but by talking to folks I met on this workshop, that path may not really fit my skill sets. And by exploring a little bit more, by talking to different people, I realized business development in life science fit my skill sets and interest better. So right now I'm on the journey to find my next new job in BD.
That is fantastic. Very exciting. Jill, with your beautiful background, love it.
I'm Jill. I've been in my current role for about 1.5 years. And when I joined my current employer, I joined they were creating a new department within the overall marketing department and a new function with new people. So I came into a role that was new, and I'm realizing now what was in the job description is not what I'm doing, and I'm not particularly enjoying what I'm doing. So I'm trying to decide, I really, really like my boss. So do I ride this out for a while and really try to dig in and see if I can solve some problems, or is it time to cut my losses and look elsewhere?
At a fork of the road, always a tricky thing. Kelly, what adventure are you on?
Hi, my name is Kelly. I am a designer. I currently am looking for a role as a product designer in the Bay Area. And the journey that I'm on right now is learning how to lean into my strengths, embrace like the accomplishments that I've had in the past, because it's hard for me to know what I should be proud of. That's been tough. But I do know that I have the ability to bring a lot of value, and it's just learning how to accept it, articulate it, and have the momentum to follow through. And I'm hoping that I learned about Joanna like a couple weeks ago, so I've been looking for something to just to think about myself differently. And yeah, that's what I'm here for.
Awesome. And last but definitely not least, Lindsay.
Hi, Friday, thank goodness. I am presently going through a business divorce for a company that I helped to create 2.5 years ago, that we co-founded. And so I'm in the process now of beginning to interview, which I hadn't done in quite some time. And so I'm kind of using this to psych me up to both reach out to people for informational meetings and kind of like in a situation of just talk to everyone right now. And it's actually been going very well, surprisingly, because people are home during COVID. And so I'm just looking for more kind of different ways to look at it. And I have started interviewing, and so just sort of different approaches, because some people now say, oh, you're too entrepreneurial, but I think they're really missing the point.
Labels. Isn't that the fun? How many of you feel better that you're not the only one who is trying to figure stuff out for yourself, and that everybody's kind of got the little voice in their head going, this is a bit off? Yeah, it's so fascinating. And I'm going to throw out this tiny challenge. And Kelly, this one's inspired by you specifically. For those of you that are, and I know a couple of folks have done this or are in the process who have gone through the value adventure, we make you go out and ask all sorts of people things and have to do all sorts of experiments and questions and all sorts of good stuff. But, listening specifically, I know, Ching, I love that you have learned more about yourself on this journey. I think this is fantastic. Because one of the things I'm known for saying is the clearer you are about who you are and what it is you want and why somebody else would want that, the easier it is for somebody else to say yes to you. It's very simple, although it's also not simple. And so if you're in this exploration phase, which I think we all are to a certain extent, I think we're all, as we're going through life, trying to figure out who do we want the future you to be, is go ask other people. I'm a big fan of just asking somebody like, what do you think I'm good at? What am I known for? Where do you think I would be helpful? Really doing some research on that. And I'm just going to share, only because I had a coaching call earlier this morning with somebody who's been going through some of these experiences, is in the process of her investigation into who she was and what her value was across the board. All of her champions kept on saying, I don't understand why you don't have a job. I don't understand why somebody hasn't hired you. And in unpacking all of that, we really found out that really her biggest obstacle is that everybody thought she was awesome, but no one could actually put the words around it. And so we're actually going to go back to the drawing board and look at how do we teach that network of champions how to talk about her as well. Because sometimes, while they're a really great resource of finding out information, you actually need to educate them. So just a little pro tip at the beginning. Okay, so this week's show is about the second document that I think is terrible and needs reinventing. I know you have all heard me rant about how terrible resumes are and how much people hate doing them because, and I quote, a resume is as useful as a nutrition label is on a can of beans these days. I think the jobs description is equally as bad. And if you didn't read it this week's newsletter talks a lot about how I think about job descriptions and how I think they need to evolve in the future. I actually think they're very similar to the concept of an RFP or a request for proposal, because that's what they're doing. And so I'm like, look, there are tons of really fantastic best practices for RFP creation. Why aren't we looking at that as a model? Because that is ultimately what we are asking. An RFP, for those of you that don't know, is a way that companies can reach out to other companies and say, look, we have a problem that we want to be solved, and here's some constructs around it, and here's what we can do. So something to think about. And if you want to go either read the article, and Kylie, maybe we can drop it in the chat, or go in and look at, I'm a big fan of looking at workflow diagrams around how RFP processes work, and maybe start to think about how you can use that for you as you are looking for your next opportunity, or even for those of you that are trying to figure out who do you want the future you to be, using the RFP process to help you kind of build some guardrails around who it is you are and what it is you want to do. So with that, I also recognize that the job description is not going anywhere anytime soon, because as much as I am on a mission to replace the job description and resume with documents that actually work for both sides of the equation, we have to work with what we have today. And so first of all, how many of you are hiring managers or have done hiring in the past? I'm just going to get an idea. So a couple of you, so about 50% of the room. Great. So I'm going to make you go back to the last time you wrote a job description. First of all, for those of you that hiring members, how many of you enjoy writing job descriptions? They were like, ooh, goody, my favorite thing to do. Yeah, no, me either. Because they're really hard, similar to resumes, and words can't really tell the story. But if you actually back up from before you write the job description, here's a guess, which I'm pretty much assuming I'm right about, of what happened is all of these awesome hiring managers sat down and said, I have a problem that needs to be solved, or I need resources to do something, or something that needed to happen in the future. That is, if you think about the process of hiring, that is the very first conversation they have. They're actually talking about, and it's usually one of two things, either a skill set that they are very clear that they need, really, and I'm going to give some really basic examples. So you're a company that has gotten some traction and some revenue, and you're about to go into maybe your second round of funding. Maybe it's time for you to have a full-time, if not fractional, CFO. And so what are the characteristics of a CFO, and what kind of responsibilities would they have? Absolutely part of the conversation. Another example is maybe you've got a team of 20 people who have a job that is really important and critical, that is client facing, and one of them has been promoted to another part of the organization. Obviously, you're going to want to backfill them. That's a resource type hire. Now, what's different about those two types of hires, although you have a pretty good idea about what does the CFO do, if you're we don't have any CFOs on the call, do we? No. Most of us have a pretty good idea of what a CFO does. How many of you would be like, oh, I'm totally comfortable writing a CFO job description? Yeah, me either, which is why I would call up some of my CFO friends and say, can you help me here? However, if I was backfilling somebody on my team of 20, where I had 20 people who'd been doing the job for a long time, I have a pretty good idea of what the requirements are and what the job description is. And that's the first idea I want to share with you, that when somebody's writing a job description, sometimes they are really clear about what does success look like, what are the characteristics, what are the criteria, et cetera, because they've been hiring for that role over time, or they have a vision around it. Sometimes they actually have no idea what it is they want, and what they are creating is a vision of who it is they think they should be based on somebody else's recommendation. I know I've never been hired for the first category. I've always been hired for the second category because that's part of my strategy as an employee. But how many of you can own that sometimes you've been hired, like how many of you have been hired for a role like the guidance was very clear, you really understood what the guardrails were, what the responsibilities were because you were backfilling a position or something like that? Are we all rule breakers? Yeah, a couple of you guys. And then Jill, have you also been hired? Well, obviously you've also said that you've been hired into a role where they kind of guessed on what the job description was, and what it was and what it is are two different things.
What it like the description is what the job should be, but what it actually is day to day is not that description. We're not even there yet.
Yeah, and then that's a whole different factor in all of this. Is statistically they actually say within 60 days of you starting a job, 70% of job descriptions don't actually apply to the role, which is kind of a horrifying statistic if you think about it. But I always sit here and say, like, as you're looking at a job description, and especially, I know there are numbers out there that say, you know, women generally look to say, you know, do I have 90+% of the requirements? What I want to share with you all, and I think, you know, I think the guys have it right, is they are kind of a guess. And because they're also guessing based on their past, you're also guessing about the future. And because you are all unique and special and bring different thinking and different approaches and different experiences to the table, the reason that the job descriptions evolve pretty quickly is how you show up and how you navigate through that role may actually create a new opportunity. So rule number one, job descriptions are just a suggestion. They are not this hard and fast thing, as much as hiring managers or recruiters will say, oh, you don't meet the qualifications, oh, you don't have this. Really what they're doing is filtering as opposed to actually evaluating. And that's something I want you to really think about. So they're having that whole conversation of we need somebody who. So that's the first question I always ask. The second question, and I am going to pop over to my shared document. So you all should have received these super fabulous new digital workbooks. And if you don't have them, we're going to be dropping the link in the chat. I'm going to pop over really quickly. Turn a page. There we go. With sound as well. To the 4 other things that I always think about when looking at a job description. So the first thing I always ask is, what's the business reason? Like, why on earth would they need this person? Because you think again about, you are, I hate to simplify this, but you're a tool that they want to be able to use in the future that they are going to pay for. And so what do you think is the ROI? You know, do they need new expertise? Do they need somebody who has a role that already exists? Like, what do you think was that first question that they were saying, look, gosh, we need to be able to solve this problem? It talks a little bit about what I was just talking about. We'll have a conversation about, like, what was the original business need, as opposed to we have budget and we want to hire people, which ultimately doesn't happen. Second of all, I do think the conversation around budget is worth a think. Because as you're looking and doing research about your companies that you're applying for and different positions, the budget conversation allows you to think about how you're positioning within the context of what you think their budget is. So as an example, and I'm going to give some pretty dramatic ones, like if you're going to work for somebody who is super early stage, have they got less actual cash, but maybe more upside and equity that they're going to offer you? And is that okay for your particular situation? I do think you kind of need to have a consideration on what is your Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Or are you going to work for a company that is established and big, and you can go do some research on something like Glassdoor and actually see what the average salary range is? This also becomes really important as you're thinking about how to respond to a job description or have conversations around a role. If, as an example, you are wanting to increase your compensation because you're leveling up, or for those of us that are at a different end of the spectrum, and Lindsay, I specifically think about your situation, like the narrative around compensation and what they might think about you just based on your past might have a really different conversation in the future. You know, I think, you know, you've got such a unique one as being a former CEO. I could see people getting really kind of monkeyed up in the skunk works about that. And so really thinking about what objections do I need to handle up front. Another really common one is for people who are looking for maybe the job between retirement for slightly older candidates. Not that this is always the case, it might be for somebody else. You know, there's always the you've got too much experience factor as well that you can think in here. So how do you get ahead of the game on the budget? The third thing that I always question when I'm looking at a job description is, how do I think that they are going to choose? So who are the characters that I'm expecting to interview with? Why would they care? Why would they individually care? And what do I think the process is? And yes, should you and could you actually call them up and ask them? Totally. Often when you're just looking at a job description, you don't know this information. And this is where, as much as I'm just going to remind you, when they write the job description, it's a bit of a guess. It's time for you to do some guessing too, because you think about what your role is in the next step in applying for the job. Your role, coming down to number 4 in the simplicity, is to make it easy for whoever is in this review process to say, I want to consider this candidate. And so really thinking about why and how people are considering people differently is really important, not just on the initial application, but the interview process. And, you know, I think about the last time I had to interview for a job, I had to meet with the CTO, the CFO, the CEO, the founder, the head of HR, and the chief revenue officer. And I'll tell you, these 6 people could not have been more different if they tried. And understanding how I wanted to respond to what they had as a job description on paper and what they wanted to have a conversation about, and having a strategy before I went into the interview process. Well, I actually couldn't say for sure that it made a difference, but I know it made a difference in my confidence in going in to have the conversation and being prepared to talk about what I thought they would want to talk about, but also being consistent about who I was in the interview process, and then also being able to thread the multiple versions of me, that I could have a conversation with a CFO, that I could have a conversation with the head of HR, and actually talk about their world and their industries, but also still be authentic to who I am and what I'm all about at the end of the day. Last thing in the simplicity, and I actually just shouted is a bad word. I tutted firmly on email to actually one of my oldest friends who I had found an opportunity that I thought she should apply for. And I said, are you interested in this job? And she said, oh yeah, can you contact me? And I wrote back and I was like, dude, you're making this too hard for me to help you. Where's your LinkedIn profile? Where's your resume? Why are you awesome language, which she absolutely has. I said, where is all of this? And I said, because if you require me to email you back, you are creating more steps in the process. And if you are not ready with your packet of goodies, it may mean that your connection gets lost in the kerfuffle. And I'm going to give you an example that is a real world one of this that isn't employment related. So how many of you live, and I'm going to stop this for a second because I want to be able to see all of you. How many of you guys live in the Bay Area? Lots of folks. Okay. So one of the things that is awesome and also horrifying about the Bay Area is the whole real estate game, whether you are renting or buying, right? Now, Granted, I've heard some of the noise recently that the rental market has softened a little bit in San Francisco, but there was absolutely a situation where when you were looking to rent a place or you were looking to buy a place in San Francisco or any of the Bay Area, you had to show up with your credit report. You had to show up with references. You had to show up with the application filled in. You had to show up with all of the goodies completed. Otherwise, you wouldn't get the property, correct? It's nuts. For those of you that do not live in the Bay Area, lucky for you, you don't have to be quiet. You practically have to have the birth certificate of your firstborn child to get places. It's getting a little easier, but it can be difficult. Same thing in the job application process. How do you think about, like, what is the kit and caboodle? What are all of the different pieces that I need to have together to make it easy, not only for somebody to refer you in, but also make it easy for somebody to say yes to you? And this is, you know, if you're part of the team here at the Amplify Lab, one of the things that you learn very early on in working in our organization is we ask two questions at the very beginning. How do we make it easy for them? How do we make it easy for us? Because we have to do stuff too. And then how do we make people laugh in the process? And this whole idea of making, like, pressing the easy button for people in the job description process, I think is really important. So that's the first part of the analysis. The second part, and this is, I'm gonna go back to my document here, is actually going through a full analysis. And you see I've given you all of the questions that you can ask, but going through a full analysis of the job description. So for those of you that missed it, which is totally fine because we can see another one, we asked one of you guys if any of you had a job that you were applying for, so we could go through the analysis process of an actual job description. So Kelly got back to us just this morning. Congratulations, Kelly, with her the job that she wanted to take a look at. And so I'm going to go through the process of reviewing this job description with you so that you can kind of see what I'm seeing and how to do an analysis. Oh no, that's reputation.com. Hang on, where did it? Oh, that was another one I was doing. Here we go. This is a role at Asana. So Kelly, real quick before I jump in, why this job for you? Why is this your dream job?
I wouldn't say it's my dream job, but it is a job that I know that I'm at least partially fit for. I don't really know what my number one dream job is at this moment, but I'm looking for, like, what could be getting there. But in terms of just like what my qualifications are and the experience that I've had in the past, this seems like it would be a good, I would have some opportunity of, like, making it through the next round.
Okay.
And I just need to practice thinking about job descriptions differently in, like, you know, learning how to talk about myself. Yeah.
Okay. So only because, and I know we're in an environment here, and I want to make sure we're in an environment here of kind of exploration and all of that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I don't assume that this is how you would actually talk to a hiring manager and all this stuff, but am I getting the impression that you are still in what I call the explore phase around your career? And like, I think it's actually, FYI, totally fine to have the answer of, I don't know what my dream job is because I'm still trying to figure out what it is. Is that a fair statement to stay where you are in your career and that you're a student of figuring out what the future could be?
Right. There are definitely different industries that I'm interested in, but I don't know which one would be, like, the greatest fit. Like, it really just depends on, like, the team culture, the project that I'm working on. And so I don't really know for sure at this moment.
Okay. Yeah. And why, and I think this is also important, why Asana? What appealed to you about the company, or was it just the job description?
Asana, so what Asana does is help make, you know, managing projects a lot easier. And for me, I know that as somebody who, you know, like when it comes to like managing different projects, like that's been a challenge. And I've used Asana to help me figure out what's on my plate. And I find the aspect of, you know, organization like a really fascinating challenge, because you know I struggle with it, and I know a lot of other people do, and just being able to help others be able to take their projects to the next level is something that I would want to be a part of.
Okay. Okay. Good to know. Yeah, we are Asana customers as well. We're a big fan. I would, just as a pro tip, I mean, listening to you, should you get through the next round where you get to have a real person conversation, I would really make sure you had a very tight and clear answer to why Asana and what it is that appeals to you about the company and what it is they're doing. Because you think about that whole part of the interview process, while yes, absolutely, it's about you and are you a good fit for them, they also want to be wanted too. You know, when you're brought into a team, it is about like, do they like us? Do we like them? Okay. So that said, let's go ahead and diagnose this resume for a second. And I'm going to highlight things. So first of all, I love that they open with a bold statement. So we're looking for people who are driven by collaboration, creative environments to develop simple, innovative, and beautifully designed products and that customers love to use. So here's the first thing. They've actually told you who it is they want you to be almost immediately. So if I was applying for a job or thinking about like what problems they're looking to solve, like what kind of people they're looking, obviously collaboration is a biggie. I think that's a fairly standard one, but I love that they've talked about creative environments, not something that somebody who's in process automation would automatically talk about. Now, only because I know the Asana product specifically, I know that having a visual element to their products is super, super important to them, the whole concept of design. So very customer centric. So thinking about what the product role is, so the product designer, what that screams to me immediately is that the problem they're trying to solve is somebody who understands how important design is within technology, like almost immediately. And I know that seems really super like no duh, but I sit here and I say, if that then is their opening foray and their opening statement, does your opening statement, does your resume, does your cover letter, do all of those actually come back and tighten up to that? Now, I think you can also go through here and do product-driven, design-led. Again, they've talked through that, talk through their who they are and what they're all about. That second paragraph will give you some more insight. But they've come back again and said, and only because I got to look at my eyes are getting too old. Their team is tight-knit, collaborative group of designers from many different backgrounds who love combining research, data, insights, peer feedback into a user-centered design process. Okay, so there's a couple of things that are being highlighted in that. It sounds like to me, remember I said who's doing the choosing? Sounds like to me you're going to meet the entire team in this hiring process. If they're tight-knit, everybody gets to be a decision maker to a certain extent. If it's tight-knit, it tells me small. So are you going on to LinkedIn and figuring out who are this tight-knit group of people and looking at their backgrounds, like what skill sets do you have that maybe they don't? Where could you be? Like I always think about teams as kind of pizza pies, and we're all different slices that maybe overlap a little bit because you know how the ingredients cover on different pieces. Like where do you fit in? But they've also said in here, we pride ourselves on having a high designer to engineer ratio, so that there's balance here. So maybe their ratio is a little off at the moment. Maybe they don't have as many designers as they have engineers. This drumbeat of design throughout this job description keeps coming back. Now, what you'll achieve, I love that they've come back and given you very clear, like here are some of the deliverables that you will have to match. This is a treasure trove of how can you bridge what you've done to what you can do. So now, while every single scenario is going to be, it's going to be a different product at the end of the day, does your resume, as you're putting in bullet points, and does your cover letter not go through every, well, on your resume, it should go through every single one of these, as many as you can. But does your cover letter highlight a couple of examples where you're particularly good? Plus, I just sit here and I go, oh my God, this is a design role. Do you have a portfolio that you could point somebody to? Like, go beyond the resume, go beyond what the rules are and say, look, here's some examples of work that I've done. Here's what you see. Like, do you have screenshots of your before and after? Like this, whoever wrote, actually I have a funny feeling I know who wrote this job description. But do you have this? And then coming back down here to the about you. Now, obviously they've got some criteria on here. Remember, this is just a guess. And I just want to throw this out to you, although I'm probably going to get some recruiters who are going to be like, no, don't do this. 5 years relevant design experience at high-tech product-driven company. Does not mean you had a designer role for 5 years. It actually means design experience. So is it a bit of a stretch? And I'm going to use myself as an example. Is it a bit of a stretch for me to say I have design experience at a high-tech product-driven company? Yes. Because was I a product designer? Absolutely not. But was I in the trenches back in the 90s trying to figure out how to explain what the internet was to a bunch of business owners who really didn't understand? And literally, I think at one point we were given stacks of colored pencils and blank sheets of paper to actually design websites with people. Absolutely. And did I do that work for, well, I did that work for 2 years. So do I have 5? No. But do I, in a stretch, have 2? Absolutely. Was it my title? No. But was the work I did design work? Yes. And again, super dramatic stretch opportunity. But I say this because we have all been brought up in the world today where, because of the way our education and a lot of our entertainment works, it's very like, have you checked all the boxes? Are you ticking all of the things? And in reality, that's, as you all know, not what work is actually all about. So as you're thinking about your design experience, it's not just when you have the job title. Now, that being said, in the applicant tracking systems and in the initial scan of your job description, are they looking at those key things? Absolutely. I was just talking with a recruiter the other day because I was like, what is it you look at when you're looking at a LinkedIn profile, which, by the way, is where they all start. Your resume is secondary, and they're looking at your photo. They're looking at your header on your photo. They're then logo scanning all the way through to your education, and then they're reading the you are interested. They are not necessarily reading bullet points. They're actually using Boolean search in LinkedIn to filter all of the keywords to actually come back up in the search results. So for those of you that are actively looking for a job, if you haven't done a really thorough work through on your LinkedIn profile, I think that's a really good idea. I also heard somebody else who is actually a LinkedIn expert do a shout out on that green open for work circle. His comment was, why on earth would you put that on there? Because it makes you look and sound like everybody else. And he goes, the goal is to stand out and be different, of which I was like, yay, stand out and be different. I'm not sure I agree with the green circle, because I think making it easy for people to understand you're available for dates is really important. But I also sit here and go, there's a lot of other real estate on your LinkedIn profile where you could actually highlight that you are open for work. I know, Ching, you've been to one of ours, like how do you create a graphic and put that in your header? There's lots of ways to teach. So again, coming back down to the requirements. So passionate about designing mobile apps, like sitting here and saying, okay, they want somebody who has a track record of shipping. So have you got examples of actually shipping products or being part of a team who has? You can see that they're talking about collaborating and building relationships. So where can you highlight as an example? Especially, so for those of you that have really diverse backgrounds and aren't linear in your career path, like this is an example to say, yes, I've done product design. And yes, by the way, I've also been part of the marketing team or part of the engineering team. When they're talking about collaboration across teams, this is a great opportunity if you've got a diverse background to say, look, I've been in these teams, and so communication is easy there. Trying to think, like they put in here strong aptitude for building prototypes, various fidelity and micro interactions using your tool of choice. Boy, let me just say that sentence has got a lot of $20 words in there. Aptitude, various fidelity, animations, micro interactions, etc., etc. Personally, I have no idea what they are talking about because I'm not a product designer to do that. But I'm guessing, has that kind of sparked some ideas around like what some of the roadblocks they might have run into, what challenges they might be having in developing their products?
Yeah, are you talking about this specific sentence, or do you mean like overall?
No, that's sentence.
So that specific sentence makes me think that there's been a problem communicating what the product needs to do and how it would be translated to an engineer or somebody who, like a stakeholder, in understanding what exactly does a user need to, what flow is a user going through in order to achieve like their goal. And being able to make a prototype will bridge that communication gap.
Exactly. I would find out what they mean by micro interactions and animations specifically. There's similar to, you know how you're always looking for the $20 word, to put the $20 words in your resume? People do the same thing on job descriptions too. So whenever you see something that sounds like you're like, really, why would they put animation rather than just talking about mock-ups? When somebody invests extra time into language, it means that this is important to them. So look for where people are investing in doing something more than really great communicator or team builder. Like they've got the other one, clearly communicate design work with solid rationale informed by research and data, may mean that they've made some bets that were kind of gut instinct choices, and they want to see that you've got you can actually bring the chops of analysis behind it. It might also mean that they're a very numbers-based organization. And so as an example, I know that like Amazon as a company always wants you to have data to back up any decision. And so as you're doing pre-research into a company, like finding out some of those insights, what is the culture like? How do they measure success, et cetera, et cetera. So it might be a problem that needs to be solved, or it might just be a cultural area. So look for the $20 words in job descriptions, because as you saw from the hands earlier, lots of people do not like writing them. And so when they make effort, they do that. And then last but not least, I think their About Us is also quite insightful. What this is telling us is, like, because they talk about they're fueled by transparency and inclusion, they're lauding their awards on being a great place to work. You know, this then gives you a really great opportunity to talk about who you are as a human being.
I see.
You know, always sit here and say, like if you think about different jobs and who it is you're bringing to work, I think we've all worked for companies where they actually want you to be separate between your life and your work, right? I know I certainly have. And then there's been other companies where they actually want to bring you to bring your whole self to work with all of the goodies that come with it. And what this part of the job description is telling us is really that they're looking for your whole self. So I just sit here and in the process, probably for the interview process, once you've gotten to know them better, is don't be afraid to share really human stories about yourself. You know, you don't want to be too robotic in who you are and what you're all about. This is why resumes still have like, what are our interests in there? Like, I'm trying to think if they got anything in here. Curious, like they're all into mission-driven people and all of that sort of stuff. Like, what are some stories? Like, maybe what is your volunteer work? Something like that. So really bring that whole person to work. It just really sends up a flag. So we've just done an analysis with Kelly. How many of you have looked through a job description thinking that way and said, like, what is the story behind each sentence? Yeah, it's a really helpful exercise as you are thinking about, you know, not only what are they looking for, but is this the right place for me? So again, use the workbook to help you think through those questions. And we made it a digital format for you so that you could actually keep reusing it over and over again. And actually may just make sure there was nothing in the workbook. No, that's it. It's there for you to be able to use, and it's really helpful to go through all of those questions with every single job description, because ultimately what it allows you to do before you go into the interview is make sure you have what I call an anticipatory mindset for having the conversation. So those are this week's advice on going through a job description. Before we get into last bit of Q&A and then the challenge for this week, Kylie, are you ready to spin the wheel of awesome to find out who our winner is this week?
I am ready. Let's do it. All right.
All right, for those of you that are unaware, this is the opportunity for people to win free sessions with me. And
There we go.
we actually have Holly on the call today, but that's okay because she will be getting the recording of this, but we will be reaching out to her with information on how to schedule your one-on-one. Super exciting on all of that. So before we wrap up, because I do have a challenge for you all, as I always do, I'm sure as you were thinking through what I just went through, that some of you have some questions about how to diagnose and pull apart a job description. So any questions? Kylie, did we have any that came through chat that I should be aware of originally?
So far, not in the chat, no.
Any comments or questions from the audience? Give us a wave. We're all good. Okay.
I thank you, Joanna, for doing that. Yeah, you helped me look at the job description in a different way. So I really appreciate it.
Oh, awesome. Well, here is, you are more than welcome. I want everybody to find their dream job for now. Because we're all I'm certainly having my dream job for now because I get to tell people why they're awesome for a living. It's the best. But we're all on a bit of an adventure and finding this out. And what I was also reminded about this week was that our adventures sometimes feel super alone. And having somebody there who is in your corner to help you along with that is always a good idea. So what we are testing out this week for the first time, and we'd be curious to hear your feedback on whether this works or not, is we would love to buddy you guys up to help each other. Because I have a funny feeling that if you are here, it's because you are curious about the future you and how to navigate this weird and wonderful world we are in. So how many of you are up for being partnered up with somebody else who is on this call to help each other be a different set of eyes to not only diagnose the job description, but then see where you match on your resumes with that role? How many of you would be interested in being partnered up with another person on the call? Okay, so Kelly, Ching, and Joanna, and if any of the rest of you want to drop in chat that we can't see if you want to be buddied up. So what we're going to do is we'll figure out how many we've got at the end of this. We're going to kind of pair you up. What I challenge you to do is schedule a chat like this, get one-on-one on the phone, and be almost a mirror for each other. And what I mean by a mirror is not necessarily saying like, this is what I would do and this is what I can see. Just look at the information and go, this is what has jumped out to me. If I was reading this, this is what I would say. You just saw me do with that with Kelly just now. Well, kind of an idea what a product designer does, but not completely. But I was able to kind of come through and say, look, this is what I see and this is what I think. Take a look at the resume and say, look, does it look like it's an easy connection between the two? I think you can really help. So we will buddy you up and introduce you all, look for an email, and I'll look for you all to do that. Super curious to hear from you whether it's a helpful exercise, because one of the big things that we are always talking about here at the Amplify Lab is, should we create an environment where people can do things together, help each other, because this is a bit of a lonely adventure. We do have, by the way, if you're going through the value adventure, you get to come to what I call power hours on Friday morning. We had one this morning where we talk about you and your adventure, and we actually talk about the details in there. So we're there for you there, but I think there's an opportunity here in creating a community environment a little bit here. So other than that, that is today's show. On all of your individual adventures, I wish you the very, very best of luck. And always remember, like, make it easy, figure out how to make saying yes to you super simple. Make sure you're talking about your uniqueness. And if you don't know what is uniquely valuable about yourself, go ask your champions. And remember, if they don't know that you exist, they can't choose you. And so make it easy for people to understand what your unique value is, and it'll be easier for them to say yes.
Ultimately, we're here to help you figure out how to teach other people who the future you is, so that you can be you in the future. Because the clearer you are about who you are, what you want, and teach other people why that's awesome, the more likely you get to be you. I know, it's a bit of a circle. I'm Joanna, your potentialist and fairy godmother, and I wish you the very best. Thanks for coming.